All right, once again, another project on this 2003 Nissan Maxima GLE. This is a 2003, so this is a 22-year-old car, but it's only got 160,000 miles on it, which is pretty low. It's really low mileage for that year. But what I'm wanting to shoot today, that I've had a radiator, or not a radiator, a coolant leak out of this car that I noticed maybe a couple of weeks ago. Not along the driver's or the passenger side where the water pump would be, but this is more on the driver's side. And so what I did is, to help me track this down, I put in half a bottle of this radiator coolant dye, and I probably could even put in a quarter of a bottle and it would have shown up fine. I was able to inspect it from the top, but I've got this just lifted up in the air just for showing you kind of where the leak is. But if you've never used it before, you just put it in and let it run for a while. I probably let mine run for 20 minutes after I put it in. And then what happens is you get a black light. You just buy these cheap flashlights, and then you can kind of see how that shows up on the camera, how it's like really neon green, where the coolant is leaking from. And so you can just kind of follow it up. I don't know how well this is going to show on the camera, but you can see it's there. Then further up in, you can kind of see that there's this tube a little higher up there, the point, and that's where the coolant line comes out of the engine or the cylinder heads, and then flows to the top of the radiator, and I'll show you here in just a second up top. But while I'm down here, you are going to need to drain the radiator, and so this is from the bottom side of the vehicle looking forward, but it's going to be on the driver's side. There we go. On the driver's side end of the radiator, there's a little nut. Mine's a little nut that's up in there, and there's actually a little hole through the shroud. Let me see if I can tilt this here. Try doing this with one hand. So there's a little hole through the shroud that you can access it. So you don't need to take the plastic shroud off, which is pretty nice. So right there. So I'm going to get the coolant draining here, and all right. So this is the top. This is the top. From the top view. I've taken off my little plastic shroud that sits on here. There's about 4 bolts that hold that in, and then I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a good enough angle on this to see. I noticed I could see it, a little bit of peak at it from this angle. I don't know if that's going to show up. Right in there where that tube goes, there's a bolt on top and bottom, and anyway, it's an aluminum tube. It looks like that's connected in 2 locations, front and the back, and I'll show you a better view when I get some of this stuff moved out of the way. But there's 2 connections to the side of the engine. I'm going to need to take the air box off, the air intake, to get to it, but once again I'm going to drain the radiator first, and we'll go from there. Alright, got my coolant draining right there, and I'm going to just work on getting the upper part of my air intake and shroud off while that's continuing to drain. Alright, I'm going to just go ahead and start getting some of the stuff removed. Take this off. There's 2 little just kind of plastic retainers to take off right there. Pretty easy to get in there with a little screwdriver to lift these up, lift the center pin up. Just be careful. A lot of times these are brittle, and a lot of times they do break, but you can buy replacement ones for these if you need to. There you go. Pull out the centerpiece, blaze, and then should look at that. And then you can put it there. So that's what it looks like right there. So in there. And then we just push it through. Just grab the ends to hold it in place. Use them. So hold these guys. It's much easier. And that's it for this whole piece. And that's that. Alright, and there's several of these little bolts that we'll need to loosen up. There's one down here in between the battery. And then I would just go ahead and take these ones that look like they're mounted to the engine bay part. Take those out. We will need to loosen up. Probably end up taking both of these couplers off. Like I said, take out this tube or unhook it from one side, and we'll get this removed, and then we're going to have some better access to the area there that we need to get. Alright, 10 millimeters. Slide these off. Just over here. On the far side. Most of these are the same length, a little shorter. This is right here, close to the airbox. This just takes all these mass airflow sensor. This did to this. Shorter somewhere. Put an extension down there. Slide them out of there. So now I'm using this here. It's the 8 probably. This is the laser. And this is the laser. This back. Alright, so those worm threads I was talking about is this little 8mm hex adapter or bolt that goes through there, and then same with this back one that holds it to the air intake. You do want to remove the mass airflow sensor clip right here as well. Just be able to move this out. And I am going to go ahead and remove these little plastic clips that are holding this in, just so I can take this airbox out and not have it tied down to this. Kind of need to push it on both sides to kind of get it out of there. I've had these removed a couple of times, so I think some of these are actually just kind of broken a little bit. So they come out pretty easy. Yeah, that one's broken. And this one looks like it's been broken too, so these come out pretty easy. They're going to put that up there for now. And then this part of the should come out of here. Okay, this section comes out like that. And then like I said, we'll want to remove this. We might not need to, but it's just going to give us a little bit better access to the area that we're working, so we can look at it a little easier. So this pops off right there. Don't lose these. Don't forget to put these back on. In fact, I'll leave that there. I'm going to take this little tube off first. So it's got a retaining clip right there. You can grab some with a wrench, pinch it and pull it back. And then you'll want to kind of wiggle this back and forth off there. And then you can remove this whole thing together. And then it gives us a lot more breathing room in order to get to the bolts and screws for this. And I'm going to have to remove some of this as well. Adjust my light a little bit better if I can. Alright, so these are 10mm bolts that are holding this to the side of the... And these are just brackets. We're just loosening the brackets up. And you might not even need to do this to get... I mean, I can get to this bolt okay, I can get to this, and then probably pull this back, but I want a little bit of wiggle room to get in there. And so I'm just going to take these off so I can just get a little bit of breathing room with that. If I have to take this transmission dipstick off, I can. There's another bolt bracket holding it down on top of the transmission, so we might need to potentially do that depending on how things go here. Okay, so those are off. Loosen this bracket up off of it as well. There's another little bolt down here. Holds this whole assembly on. And there's not any nuts. These are just bolts that go through the bracket and into the actual tube that has the threaded insert on it. Unplug this, it's a blue one, and then this one is red. There we go. So yeah, it's just plugged. Huh, interesting. And then there's a gray one on this side. Okay, I'm going to try and get this zip tie retainer pushed through here off this bracket, just because it's might give me a little bit more wiggle room. There we go. So that bracket is now loose. There is another bolt. It's holding it to this retainer. And I'm just going to undo that real quick. Guys, yeah, that's the way. And that just loosens up the bracket on this side that was holding this big cable here, and then this other little socket that went to this gray plug. And so we'll get those put back on here. We'll get those put back on there when we're ready to put it back together. Just gives us a little bit of just more room to finagle this tube. You might be able to do it without. That's how I'm doing it. So I went ahead and popped this bracket off. You can kind of see here. You basically come from behind. You push on the you push on the tab, and then lift, and this whole thing just lifts off. There's a thing that it catches on when it goes like this, and you push on that, and you lift that off. And I'm going to do the same for this electrical cable over here that's behind this. Once again, just so I can move things out of the way. It's the same concept with getting this off. You push in on this, or you can get it to it from this way. There we go. Pull back, and this whole thing comes loose. Once again, because we've loosened up the bracket here. This comes up and out of the way. This has got a lot of room now to where I should be able to get to. And this is just a bracket here holding that on. I don't think I need to. I think this will all just kind of come loose when I undo these two screws. So I'm just going to try going for it, cracking these two bolts off. These are 12 millimeter bolts. So right in there below the green. Let's lower this a little bit. So that bolt that nut right there above the B, I need to take that one off, and then there's another one on the underside. And then on the front part of this here, you see the top right there, and then should have plenty of room to get to the bottom underneath this this coolant line coming back on the front. So I'm going to try just loosening those up here real quick, and then seeing how much give this tube will have off at that point. The bottle. Station on here. Yeah, it's way back here. There we go. So that's on. And for that, just drop it. I'll press the drop it. And take them off. Drop on. And it's the top one. I don't know if it's main top. Everybody turns it. I'm going to do that. So we'll see. I have to look to see it. Take it back on the other. So. Oh, yeah, try to get to it. Just put it on the camera. Okay. And we'll see. Okay. So it does come loose a little bit there. On the back one, front one, a little more stubborn here. Probably, oh, yeah, this line right here, this bottom coolant line is giving us a little bit of resistance outward. All right, so at this point, I've got some wiggle room, just not enough. These two coolant pipes are preventing it from coming out. The service manual actually says to disconnect those, and looks like they anticipate disconnecting those. So I mean, you could do it here, which I tried backing this off, but it's kind of stuck on there pretty good. And that's part of it. This one would be kind of the same thing, getting that unhooked, but I'd still have the problem with this bracket catching on it. So I think they really do intend to have you do it over here, actually at the if you get in there right there. So these two bolts right there, take those out, and those pipes should come out. There's an O-ring on the end of each one of those, and you'll always good to replace O-rings and gaskets if you're monkeying with them. Especially hopefully this is the only time this is going to be taken apart, so it's worth the extra few dollars to put some new O-rings on there, and you won't have to do it later down the road. Which is why I'm just doing all these gaskets at the same time, this other one on it with it as well. So I'm actually going to try taking that off, and we'll see how things look. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and install this front one first, since that was a little bit trickier one to get off there. Okay, so that's actually a little bit loose just with pulling that up. Okay, and I'm going to get this put on the back. Going on the back. Should be good like that. There we go. All right, that's in there, and then actually the dealership had my O-ring, so I just got to run into that and throw that on there and put this coolant line back on, and I'll start going in reverse order here for you. Okay, and actually the local dealership had the part. This is the part number right there for this year of Nissan Maxima. There's the O-ring right there. So I'm going to take the old one off, which is right in here. comes off pretty easily. I mean, it looks like it's probably pretty good, but roll this one on. Careful with it. And then just try to get it back into this. There we go. Slides in there pretty easily. Get my little bolt put back in. And once again, this little bolt here is 75 inch, excuse me. Yeah, 75 inch pounds. So not a whole lot, just enough to just hold it in there basically. And then I'm just going to go ahead and attach these back onto the, just attach these sensor sockets back onto these metal posts. Just hold them in place there. Okay. All right. I'm gonna move that. All right. So then with everything, I'm just going to start putting everything back together. There we go. Okay. Get this little metal bracket resituated. And get this clipped back on, this little plastic hose holder for the return lines. Snap that back in so those are situated. I had to loosen this just to make it easier to work with. Probably can't really see what I'm doing, but this bolt holds these just two metal brackets together. Since these are just holding two brackets together, you just make it pretty snug. All right. And then the bolt to put that in there, and then the bracket is held by another bolt down here lower. That comes in from the side. And it goes into the top of the water outlet tube. It's just holding a bracket in place, so just snug, don't too hard and strip that out. Alright, so brackets are in place, and then we can start plugging some of these sockets together and re-putting in the clips. For example, this is a plastic zip tie that goes into the hole on this right there, and then this was attached. This is a gray end, but it goes on this blue connector, and then this was just like I don't know why it doesn't have anything else, but anyway, this clicks into the plastic right there. And then don't put this back on now. Snap that into place. Everything's looking good there. And then there's these two bolts here. So this is for the lower coolant tube. There's a bolt that we had taken out, just a little small, probably 1 centimeter, 10 millimeter bolt to hold this bottom bracket in, or this bracket of this return hose. I'll just snug that in. There we go, once again, just snug. Don't want to break those off. Alright, so that's the upper tube secured. Now, we'll start putting together the transmission tube. So this is what I'd taken off. This goes down into the transmission, this end does. You can see it's held on by a bolt, and then this is the top, and this is the top of the bracket that goes in on that tube. So I'm going to just put it down in first. Take out my paper towel. I was holding it clean. And there is an O-ring down in there at the bottom here. Trying to be a little careful about that, so it just slides down in there. And another little bolt down here to hold it into the top of the transmission here. And because of the curve of this tube, it's a little tricky to get to, so I just used a little extension on my little 1/4 inch socket ratchet here, and again, that doesn't have to be in there horribly tight, it's just meant to hold it in place. It's just snug there, and so now this will align to the top here. Right there is where it was. And then once again, just put in this bolt there. Alright, now we'll put in our transmission. Alright, now we'll put in our transmission dipstick. Just make sure it's nice and clean. I wiped it off camera before putting it in here. There we go. So that's set in. It's looking good. And we'll start putting back together the air box. So this, don't forget, this end of this tube goes onto that. Don't forget your 2 little rings on this end, so get it on this good. Get this end down against the top of that valve cover. And then don't forget to put this clamp over on this end, put this clamp back to hold it on. There. So it's like on here. Oh, let this see. Oh, wait. Let me just it out. Right there. Alright. Oh, look at the boxes. Okay, down. Putting both of the Unfortunately, you get down here. It's pretty tight, you don't want to drop it down to your get on there, so you can stand it down first. It's a bit easier. Move things up just a little bit, playing on the bottom of this other bolt. There we go. There we go. There's one. Snap all these. Okay. Now, make sure it goes back on there. Together. And on here. See, it hangs off on this little broken here. So that's it for putting everything back together. Oh, nope, gotta get the, that's a bit of parenting on. Hang out. Push this in. There you go. Should be together. Just check everything, make sure put everything back in, so no loose parts. And good. Opens up, and now we're gonna refill our radiator with radiator fluid. I got the concentrates. I'm gonna do one with the distilled water and concentrates. Coolant. All right. So at this point, I got out probably around 5 quarts of my coolant. I have a 7-quart drain pan, and it's not quite all the way to the top, so it could even be more than 5 quarts. But I'm going to kind of tentatively put in 2.5 quarts of the coolant and then 2.5 quarts of the distilled water. Don't forget to put in your drain plug at the bottom before you do this. I've put mine in, and we'll go ahead and get going here. So this is about 4 quart. So half this is usable and half is concentrated coolant. That's a half right there. Now we're going to use the water. I'm not seeing this with the water specifically. We might need to start running the engine a little bit here. For next, I'm going to try and burn this in a little bit too. Alright, so we're getting close to half and half here. We'll start up this in a little bit. Half the water. And there we go. That's about half and half. Right now, and it's just kind of sitting over the fins inside the radiator. So I'm going to turn it on and run the engine for a little while. Let this all mix together and distribute to the other parts of the engine. And that wraps it up. Just drove it around. I've got heat coming through the heater. I don't see any obvious leaks yet, but I'll have to drive it around for a little longer and check it out. I didn't see anything on the floor, so it wasn't a very fast leak that I had. It was pretty slow, but I'll probably drive this for a little bit before posting the video just to make sure everything looks good.